Hello, I'm Hugo Salinas Price here in Mexico City. As a Mexican observer of the most recent presidential election, I thought Trump would make a good president of the US, much better than his rival, Hillary Rodham Clinton, who ran on more of the same stuff that obtained during Obama's tenure. Trump's message seemed refreshing, perhaps to herald a different and better US government. Within my small social group, no one, except myself, thought that DJT could win the election, but when he did. One characteristic of DJ Trump as President of the US is his compulsion to post personal comments on the internet. Now, it seems to me that any experienced politician will tell you, in confidence of course, that a politician must keep his personal sentiments and views completely private and only very rarely and carefully express his considered views to the public. But DJT lets it all hang out. A very grievous error on the part of DJT stems from his lack of understanding of the role of the dollar in world affairs. He is doing his best to shut down all possibility of other nations of the world accumulating dollars by selling tangible goods to the US in exchange for US dollars, which are really either non-tangible digits in computers or to a much lesser extent papers stamped with various quantities, that is to say, paper dollars. Now, this enormously favorable deal for the US is Trump's bête noire, that is to say, the black beast that he hates. He wants to set up tariffs on imports right and left to protect some American industries, which are anyway close to extinction. This measure is going to cost American consumers dearly because the tariffs are paid not by the Chinese, but by the Americans. This cannot be the way to make America great, as DJT assumes. Trump is shutting down an arrangement that was set up in 1944 at the International Monetary Conference at Bretton Woods, when the dollar was established as a fundamental currency of the world. This setup was further expanded when President Nixon in 1971 famously closed the gold window of the US and resolved that hitherto dollars held by foreign countries should not have the option of redeeming those dollars for gold to be delivered by the US in exchange for the dollars tendered for redemption. Since 1971, all currencies in the world, perhaps we could accept the Russian ruble and the Chinese yuan recently, have been merely national versions of the US dollar masked as national currencies. Now, Donald J. Trump has been thumping friendly countries by setting up tariffs on their exports to the US. According to his thinking, all exporters to the US harm the productive activity of the US. The more that tangible foreign exports enter the country, the more those countries accumulate dollars, which are in reality nothing at all. So DJT is working hard to destroy that arrangement whereby the US gets lots of things in exchange for nothing at all, for dollars are really nothing at all. The latest victim of DJT's policy is Mexico, where I live. Mexico has an abundance of good laborers willing to work for wages which are much lower than wages in the US. So now DJT has it in for Mexico, which has never in its existence waged war on anyone. Thanks to lower wages and a hard-working and loyal workforce, Mexico was able to accommodate American industries that have attempted to survive by outsourcing their production to Mexico. So now, Mexico is the enemy. As Tucker Carlson labeled Mexico recently on Fox News, I mean, this is outrageous. We are the enemy. Listen, I'd like to remember that in 1847, the US took away from Mexico something like 1.5 million square miles of Mexican territory. So who is the aggressor? Well, caravans of would-be immigrants to the US overwhelmed Mexican authorities at the southern border of Mexico with Guatemala. I ask you, Were the Mexican soldiers supposed to open fire upon the massive caravans of immigrants? What would be the result for Mexico of killing numbers of immigrants on its southern border? Just imagine the horrendous pictures on US TV of the massacre of unarmed immigrants by the Mexican army. I mean, it's impossible. DJT does not want to have those thousands of immigrants enter the US, but just like Mexico, he does not want to have to machine gun them to keep them out. He did not get the money to build the wall. He doesn't know what to do, and so he decides to punish Mexico. DJT further chastises Mexico for its drug lords. Now I'd like to mention to you what we all know in this country of Mexico, that the drug lords are armed to the teeth with high-power firearms. But where did the firearms come from? From the surreptitious delivery of these high-power firearms by the U.S., the secret agencies of the U.S., to the drug lords, to make sure that their drugs continue to reach the U.S., where they enrich the local drug lords, who of course do not make the news. It seems that in the huge United States, where drugs reach every corner of the USA, there are no drugs at all. There are no drug lords. A good story, I must say. So DJT, who has lost control of the US-Mexico border, now holds Mexico hostage and threatens to raise tariffs on its exports to the US. Exports largely provided by US enterprises operating in Mexico. However, let's get down to the basics. The big picture is that the supremacy is ending because DJT is killing it. The supremacy of the dollar has been like a sword that cut both ways. One side, favorable to the US, was enormous political power which came with worldwide use of the dollar as a reserve currency. It allowed the US industry to establish itself in foreign countries in important productive sectors. The dollar was hungrily sought by all countries, which did their best to export things of value to the US in exchange for a currency that is worthless in itself. The dollar favored the creation of military blocs and projected US military power around the world in opposition to communist Russia and China. But the other side of the dollar sword is that in search of profits from lower costs, the US has exported much of its productive facilities to the rest of the world, and consequently, the American middle class has been impoverished. Only low-paying, humble jobs are mostly available. The US middle class is on the verge of extinction. Every year, the US government has to hand over colossal sums of social spending of dollars to the public in attempting to sustain the American way of life, no longer viable since a large portion of the high-paying jobs has been exported. DJ Trump does not understand the monetary arrangements that have been in force since 1971, and he is doing his best to destroy that something-for-nothing deal that has worked for the U.S. since 1971. DJT is setting up tariffs, which will have to alienate the friends of the U.S. one after another. The conclusion must be that the U.S. under DJ Trump is headed for isolationism, and that will put an end to the U.S. dollar as the basis for all national currencies, perhaps with the exception of Russia and China. As a last comment for you, I ask you, you got gold?